Before we get to questions, we've got some samples, and Jim, you've got something edible on that and something that ate the rest of it.
People eat it and so do insects. We all fight for the same stuff. I just want to show you this pea plant here. I know we're all harvesting peas now and we're getting toward the end of the season, but if you happen to see injury, you still haven't got your pod set, or your peas are still developing and quite small, this kind of injury is interesting because it's caused by what we call the cabbage looper. And we often think of cabbage loopers as just feeding only on cabbage plants. So it's just a green looping inchworm kind of a caterpillar. It's quite small at this point when it makes those window pane kind of damage. When it makes the ragged holes, that means it's bigger. But anyway, as you're looking through your peas to see if you're trying to find some of those yummy pods and you see these green worms, smoosh them with your finger, and that'll keep their numbers down. Remember, if you don't deal with them, they'll kind of come back and haunt you again for later crops. So that's just one easy way to get rid of them. Look for them and smash them with your finger, or you can use Bacillus thuringiensis to control them as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Tasty pea pods. Okay, Lowell, something that some people think might be a flower.
Well, yes, and I guess it could be kind of mistaken for that every now and then, because we have these seed heads popping up. And what I brought in this evening was buckhorn plantain. It's really starting to flower right now. It's a perennial. It has it's pretty low growing to the ground, but it shoots up these stalks here in June and July, and folks may confuse it with something that's desirable out there, but this one isn't. It is a plantain. Interesting thing about this one is plantains have parallel veins on the leaves. Most broadleaves have netted veins on the leaves, so that's just kind of one way to tell that apart. And because it is perennial and is flowering right now, it's really not the best time of year for chemical control. Just keep the seed heads mowed off. Best time to apply is something like dicamba or 2,4-D would be in the fall or early in the spring. But because it's a perennial, where you see it now, it will be there next year. So if you don't want it there, plan on making an application of a herbicide this fall or early next spring.
Or dig it out.
Or dig it out.
Excellent. Kevin, a larger sample than you are.
Yes, kind of in my way here. I have a elm tree, and this is probably a Siberian or some kind of hybrid thereof. And it has a vascular wilt fungus occurring, and you can see on the stem, when you remove the bark to a certain layer, to a certain depth, you'll see this brown streaking. The inside of the tree should look like it looks just above that area, this kind of whiter or lighter brown area. So what happened is that I carved down a little bit deeper into the wood, and that streaking goes away. So it'll only be in the cambium layer, which is just right below the bark, but isn't too deep into the wood. And that's where you'll see the streaking. Now the thing is that there are a couple different things that will produce these kind of symptoms. There we go, there it is again. Dutch elm disease and verticillium wilt. Dutch elm disease isn't known to be a pathogen on Siberian elms, but it is on Americans. So if you have an American elm and you're seeing vascular streaking in areas of die out towards the top of the tree, you might have a wilt fungus. I would suggest submitting a sample for diagnosis, although the treatment and the management recommendations are the same. Unfortunately, you have to kind of remove those areas or the pathogen will spread to the rest of the tree. It's systemic, it's inside the tree. So eventually, unfortunately, you're going to lose areas until the whole thing is probably gone. You might need to replace the tree. So nasty things to have happening, and you can see their signs and symptoms by peeling away the bark.
Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Kelly, something that is usually quite pretty.
Yeah, it is usually quite pretty. This one is a little bit spent. I have a Japanese tree lilac here. And if you're looking for a little bit smaller tree that blooms at a little bit different time of the year, then you might want to consider a Japanese tree lilac. These bloom, they bloom for about 2 weeks here in June. And this one, you can see the flower, it's spent flower. Basically, all the petals are already gone, but you can see the shape of that panicle. And when the tree is blooming, it's quite pretty. And there's very few trees that bloom in June. This is also, the tree will get about 20 to 30 feet tall. So it's not a really large tree, but it's not a really small tree either. It's kind of a medium-sized tree. They're a fairly tough tree. They'll grow in, they'll tolerate slightly alkaline soil. They'll tolerate winds. They're grown as street trees, so they tolerate urban conditions. They do not tolerate poorly drained soils. So that's one place in a clay soil where it doesn't drain well or water stands for periods. You don't want to plant them. But otherwise, it's just kind of a little bit different tree that'll bloom at a different time of the year. And you can see the foliage is a typical lilac leaf, but Japanese tree lilac.
Great, thanks,
And
Kelly.
ivory silk is probably
Ivory
the
silk
most
is a good
common
one.
cultivar because it blooms at a fairly young age and fairly profusely.
Yep, excellent. Thanks, Kelly. All right, Jim, you get the first question or picture. This is a viewer who sent us an image from Lexington,
Okay.
and she identified the creature as something that falls near bailiwick. She called it a slug. It's in her pansies, and she wonders what to do.
Ooh, good key word is pansy.
Yeah.
That is a variegated fritillary butterfly caterpillar. And so it has beautiful colors of red and ivory, and it's got these blackish horns coming out of its body, and especially two of them in front coming from the head. And that one looks pretty mature. They like to feed on violets and pansies, and I thought it was kind of interesting. Purslane, too, with all the purslane we have around here. I wish there'd be a lot of them. But anyway, there's something to appreciate, and especially like if they're attacking, move them over to your violets if you can. We want to have our pansies, but anyway, they're just too valuable and aesthetic to do anything as far as controlling them. I just let them go and enjoy their feast, and you'll enjoy the beauty of their flight later on.
Excellent, thanks, Jim. All right, Lowell, we have people who have what they think is foxtail barley,
Okay.
and in flower or in seed head or something like that, and they wonder if that is a correct diagnosis, and if it is it something you need to control and kind of the edges of landscapes or lawns, those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think that is foxtail barley. Foxtail barley is a perennial. It's one that kind of seeds out in late spring, early summer, and has really kind of a almost whitish, silverish seed head to it. It's more of a clump perennial. So if folks want to get rid of it, you can either spray Roundup or glyphosate, spot treatment on that, or just simply hoe it out. They can be kind of difficult to pull or hoe out because the root mass is pretty good in the soil there. So you may have to work at it a little bit, but yeah, it's a weed.
It's also kind of pretty.
Well, it can be. Well, most weeds are.
Of course, that was an opening.
Yeah.
That was an opening for you. All right, Kevin, we have an Omaha viewer, West Omaha actually, who found what he walked out and all of a sudden his lawn had purple patches in it and it wasn't paintball. And he's wondering what it is and what he should do about it. And I think we have both that one, and he gave us a pretty good close-up. Yeah, there we go.
That is nice. That is what we call a slime mold. Slime molds are they're pretty harmless. They are not plant pathogens at all. In fact, they're single-celled organisms that kind of live on the soil surface in soil debris. They feed on other microorganisms, other bacteria. All they're using the grass for is the fact that it's a vertical stalk. They need something to come up on and produce those sporangia, which are filled with spores. You'll only see those fruiting bodies for about 1 to 2 weeks. They'll go away, might come back again the following year if weather conditions are conducive. But you can just wash it off with a hose if you really don't like it. Slime molds are favored by excessive thatch, so if you have a lot of thatch, you might want to consider power raking to get rid of the problem. But they're harmless. They're pretty neat. They come in all different shapes and sizes and colors. They can be white or gray or pink or purple or yellow. There's some yellow ones that can be quite extensive. I don't want to be too vulgar here, but it can look like maybe your dog got sick on the lawn and it'll be a pile just sitting there or in the mulch pile. Again, they're harmless. You can wash them away. It's a slime mold. Very neat organism.
And we had a different one last week, and the guy caught it, the picture of it when it looked like it was bleeding. Okay, Kelly, you have a viewer from Gretna who has a 15-year-old river birch. For the past 5 years, they've had issues with iron chlorosis. They've done a rather extensive and somewhat invasive treatment of iron, and they've also cut one of the big main 3 stems down. They're really wondering here whether they also are seeing some brown spotting on the foliage. Those pictures, unfortunately, were not clear enough for us to be able to put them on air, but they're wondering what else they should do, if anything. He kind of wants to cut it down because it still has dead branches, but it looks like a portion of it is still decent.
Right, and it is iron chlorosis, or possibly manganese would be another nutrient that would be lacking, and again, it's due to our high pH soils. But with river birch, and I'll say the high, as you know, or I've heard many times on this program, the high pH ties up the iron or the manganese. It's there, it's just not readily available to the plant at a high pH. And with river birch, a lot of times it's compounded. The problem is compounded by a heavier, if you're trying to grow it in a heavier soil, such as a basement excavation soil, a subsoil. If the soil is compacted, if the soil is stays very wet for long periods, those can all compound the problem and make the chlorosis even worse. I don't know, if trying to core aerate would help, making sure the soil doesn't get really wet and stay wet for long periods with lawn irrigation. Maybe you can't see the base, maybe some mulching. You could try, again, the other thing to try would be, maybe to find a product that has manganese in it and see if, since they've tried iron it sounds like they've tried iron quite a bit, or you've tried iron quite a bit, so you might want to see if you can get a product with manganese and see if there's a response. If there isn't a response after everything you've done, then you might want to consider starting over with a tree that is adaptable to our high pH soils.
Okay, Jim, you get a picture. And this is a viewer in Omaha who had recently harvested rhubarb. Said in some of the spears there was a borer in the lower end of the stalk. He wonders what he's seeing here, and then what does he do about it, obviously, next year.
Yeah, next year. Well, that is our common stalk borer, we call it. And it tends to be problematic when there's a lot of weeds around that have remained from the previous year because the moths deposit their eggs among those weeds. So sanitation is really important to keep their numbers down. But they are quite active, and they're active at night, and they'll move from plant to plant, and they find certain stems. And we all know that they can get in corn stalks, tomato stalks, or stems, peppers. And here they are in rhubarb. Petiole, because it's big and juicy. And so they'll go through it and mine through it. And of course, they're not causing a lot of damage. So when you see them, as you're cutting your stalks of rhubarb, just eliminate them, smash them again. That'll be the word tonight, spoosh them or smash them. And that'll help to take care of them. But next year, remember, just the sanitation is really important to help cut down their numbers there and also in the garden.
Excellent, thank you, Jim. All right, Lowell, our backyard farmer garden is a rich source of things for our
All
panelists.
kinds of good stuff.
You have 2 pictures of weeds in the backyard farmer garden that I think are fairly common in other places. This actually has 2 potential weeds on it, the big guys. And then there's a second picture of another weed. What are they and what should we do?
Those are really common weeds. In the first picture on the left-hand side was common sunflower, and on the right-hand side was that's velvet leaf. Both are annual. Interestingly, velvet leaf seed can live in the soil. There's been studies done up to 60 years. It'll have seed longevity in the soil. These are actually some of the most problematic weeds in corn and soybeans, but we do find them in urban areas as well. They're pretty much weeds everywhere. That being said, some people really like sunflowers and like the little sunflowers on them, so they could be positive as well. The other one was common lamb's quarters.
Lamb's quarters.
And that one comes up real early. It can be a pretty tough garden weed. It's an annual, occasionally sources of infestation if people are mulching with bales of hay, things like that. If there's a mature lamb's quarter plant in that bale of hay, there can literally be thousands and thousands of seeds in that, and it can create a problem.
Okay, so our mulching last year with infested straw didn't help us. This year we used clean wheat straw,
Makes
And
a difference.
Yeah, and we had a viewer ask us where we got it, and we actually got it from a local farmer who baled the straw. So, all right, thanks so much. Kevin, this is a viewer in Plattsmouth, 5-year-old bur oak grown from seed. They haven't pruned it, they have mulched it properly, but they're seeing this on the leaves, and you might see the darkened areas along the edges on that. They want to know if it's harmful and what they can do to save the tree.
Yeah, what it looks like is probably oak and anthracnose. And white oaks, or oaks that belong to the white oak family, are super susceptible to anthracnose. Usually the lesions will be associated with the veins or the leaf margins. And then after infection occurs, you'll see that kind of the leaf rolling or the abnormal leaf deformation. The only other thing that can do that is maybe herbicide drift or herbicide injury. What I would do is look at the symptom distribution on the tree. If it's mostly associated with the lower branches or wherever the foliage is most dense, it's a good indication that it's anthracnose. You need that high humidity and standing water for the fungus to cause infection. So if it is anthracnose, one of the better control methods is just to prune the tree and open the canopy up to a little bit more airflow, and that'll eliminate the standing water and the chance for infection. You want to remove all the leaves that fall in the winter as well, because that's a source of inoculum for the next year. And you know, if it's a specimen tree, you're super worried about it, you get it year after year. There are some fungicide products that are available that need to be applied before the buds break in the spring. Mancozeb or any copper-based fungicide should control it.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Kelly, this is a viewer who has issues with their tomatoes, and they continue to grow and put on blossoms, but the foliage is not developing. They've seen all kinds of things in their tomatoes, but this is a first. And I actually looked at these and thought those were fake tomato plants.
Yeah, and I've had a couple samples brought in like this as well. And the first thing we think of when we see that distortion and curling and cupping is the possibility of a herbicide injury. And so, you need to ask, first of all, you need to look around at other plants to see if anything else is affected. The tomatoes might be most severe, but is anything else affected? Because if as severe as those were, potential for some herbicide drift, or also you can bring in sometimes herbicide if you use manure, if you use there's some herbicides like Picloram or trichlorpyr. They're showing now that they can spray on a pasture and they can stay in manure. Again, if you've recently applied manure just to that area, maybe used grass clippings as a mulch, use straw or hay as a mulch. Probably a slight possibility, but don't overlook that. If you still, that hasn't happened, nothing else is affected, then maybe just some, what did you call it, Kim? Fasciation. And maybe, I don't know if Kevin wants to talk about that. I guess it's genetic.
Right.
It's just kind of weird development of growth.
The stem looked kind of flat and broad, so it's a possibility that, there was some fantastic fasciation.
Jim, we have insect questions flying in fast and furious. Let's start with this one. This is a Carney viewer who is seeing green bugs on the backs of the foliage of petunia and pansies.
Green bugs on the backs of
They don't say how big they are.
petunias and pansies.
Yeah.
I'm thinking possibly that they might be something like a plant bug or tarnished plant bug, and they're there and they take their meal through their needle-like mouth parts and sucking, you might say, the juices out of the stem or the leaf tissue. I would try to make sure that they are actually causing harm. If they aren't, don't worry about it. If it appears that you're getting some withering symptoms or something like that, something that could easily take care of them would be like pyrethrins or permethrin, something that can be used very effectively by contact, and then it breaks down in the sunlight. So have that ready, available in your arsenal just in case you need it, and just to make sure.
All right, thanks, Jim. Lowell, we've had an awful lot of questions this season about onion-like plants, rampant. This is a North Bend viewer. She thinks somebody gave it to her, so it might be the ornamental garlic, but onion-like stems, a white flower, she thinks, and spreads rapidly. She's actually tried glyphosate, very hard to pull. Do we have any other options for her?
Yeah, glyphosate Roundup tends to not be that effective on it. A better choice is 2,4-D or dicamba on those. The challenge on that plant is the stems are very vertical, and it's hard to get good spray coverage on the plant because it just runs off, or it doesn't come into enough of it doesn't come into contact to be taken up and translocated to the roots on that. So that's always a challenge, and that's why we typically recommend sequential applications or repeat applications on that. It is a perennial, so more than likely we talk on the show quite a bit about just a single herbicide application and thinking all your problems are going to be solved is really not realistic when you talk about perennial weeds out there, and this is one that falls into that group.
All right.
And I think people are seeing more and more of it this year because our turf stands are really thin from the drought last year, and a lot of these weeds like this have really taken advantage of that.
All right, thanks, Lowell. All right, Kevin, I'm going to give you a chance to talk about fasciation just a bit more because this is a Central City viewer who has Early Girl and Aroma tomatoes, and the tomatoes are beginning to set on, but the plants, the leaves are all curled tightly.
Real tightly.
They haven't dropped. She's been watering regularly.
Okay.
So just talk, since Kelly already talked about herbicide damage, talk a little bit about fasciation and what you do about it, if anything.
Okay, well, fasciation, it's not going to spread. It's a genetic disorder, so it's probably just that, just that plant or maybe a couple others in the garden. Usually it doesn't cause the leaves to fall off. They just might look weird or distorted. So it could be fasciation, but you would definitely see a distorted shape to the stem. It wouldn't be nice and circular or squarish. Sometimes tomatoes can be square. It'd be really flat and broad, and it would be very obvious. The other thing I'm thinking of is, since she says she's keeping it adequately watered, and it looks like it's having, leaf curl is a good indication of water stress.
Right.
There could be a root issue, possible root pathogen. And then I think, Jim, there are maybe some insects that cause leaf curling on the leaves of tomatoes.
I suppose maybe
Thrips.
thrips can, yeah, and they're very difficult to see, so that means you have to get that magnifying glass out and take a look. And when they cause their damage, the healthy tissue, of course, will kind of overlap the damaged tissue.
So a picture might be good on that one.
Picture would be great, yeah.
Okay, good. Kelly, this is a Fremont viewer who wants to know whether it is both possible and safe to trim back her sweet potato vines. Apparently they're pretty happy without damaging the plant.
Yeah, it should be fine. I don't know any reason not to. I guess when I've grown them, I've never really had to, but pinch them just ahead of a node where the stem attaches, and they should just push out a little bit more for you.
Okay, you get the next picture, Jim, and this is, we don't know where this viewer is from, but they have apricots that are about an inch long with brown spots on them. And then there are some areas that look like juices coming out.
I can see the juices. I can't see
Yeah.
the spots as well. The spots really isn't my department here. The juices emerging and the resins coming out of the fruits, that is probably Oriental fruit moth, and that would be the second generation. They attack the fruit, and of course they'll mine right through the center of the fruit, and they move toward the seed, and they like to feed around the seed exterior, and of course they introduce all kinds of rot organisms while they're doing that. So that's why a spray schedule is really important. So following the spray schedule will help to avoid problems from about a half a dozen really important orchard pests. And then the spots on the fruit.
Yeah, the small circular spots could be one of two different things. The first is a shot hole fungus. It produces small brown lesions on the leaves and on the fruit. You can identify this particular disease because it's by the name. It's called shot hole disease. When infection occurs on the leaves, it'll start out as the brown spots, and then eventually all that leaf material will just fall away, and you'll have a hole like it got blasted with a shotgun. So shot hole disease. The other one is apple scab, and I believe that apricot is a host of apple scab. So both of these diseases are managed in similar ways. Just basically good sanitation. You want to remove the leaves that have any of the lesions on them in the fall. If you're trying to market your fruit, there are fungicides that are available, some copper-based products that would need to be implemented in some kind of a spray program beginning a lot earlier in the year than now, probably somewhere around when the petals are still on the plant. So.
All right. Thanks, guys. All right, Lowell, you get the next picture. This is a viewer who wants to know what this vining woodland weed is and how you can control it, and it's a nasty creature with all those thorns.
One of the briars, cap briar, I think. You know, and it is a perennial, and other than persistently clipping and removing that, from a herbicide control standpoint, maybe a cut stem treatment. After you cut the stem, immediately dab on something like triclopyr or a product that has the active ingredient triclopyr in it. Those can be pretty effective on woody weeds. The caution or caveat with that is if it has intermingled roots with desirable trees, sometimes those herbicides may hurt desirable things as well.
All right, thanks. That one's nasty to have to deal with in the landscape. Let's see, Kevin, this is a viewer who has sent us images of a clematis, beautiful till the last 3 years. Mid-season, the leaves turn yellow, and then it takes the whole plant, turns black, looks dead, comes up next year, does the same thing over again. Can't see any insects, couldn't find any diseases. Any ideas?
Well, clematis are prone to clematis wilt, but this doesn't look like clematis wilt. Usually the foliage will turn brown, it'll be droopy, it'll look like it's wilting. This just looks like some kind of chlorosis or bleaching, which I would... my head leans towards more of a nutrient issue. It sounds like the plant is just completing its life cycle too early. It flowers, it says it loses its leaves, and then looks like it's dead but comes back. So if it were a pathogen issue, I wouldn't expect the comes back part. Or if it did, it would look less healthy. So what I would do, I guess, is if you're super concerned about it, you can send leaf tissue in for nutrient analysis and see if there is anything that's lacking, or just look at where it's occurring, if it's on the lower or the upper leaves, the newer versus the old, and what kind of chlorosis, if it's the entire leaf versus interveinal. If you kind of gather that information, it can give you a clue to what nutrient might be lacking and maybe causing it to kind of abort its life a little early each year.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Kelly, this is a viewer that has a silver maple with a codominant leader and a crack, and really wants to know whether they can save this tree or whether they have a new planting opportunity this fall.
A new planting opportunity is the short answer, but this is you said codominant leaders or a double leader, and this is why when trees are planted, we say don't do any pruning except to remove one of the double leaders, and this is why, especially on a tree like a maple, and it looked like that might have been a silver maple, maybe an autumn blaze maple, but those are just very weak, fast-growing, hence weak-wooded trees. And once you get a crack like that, the trees don't heal, so it will never really heal, and it's just a very high risk, especially as the tree gets larger and larger. And the tree can continue to grow, but it's just going to be riskier every year. So I would start over now and have a safer tree.
All right, Jim, you get an image. This is a Lincoln viewer who found these insects everywhere near her zucchini. But she says there's also a rose bush nearby, and she wonders if they're eating the zucchini, and does she need to get control of them?
Yeah, I don't think so. We've had a lot of cases of this already this year, phone calls and images sent via email, and these are box elder bug nymphs. We just don't often recognize the nymphs because they're just kind of a bright red, and they don't have those stripes and the black in them like we're used to seeing in the adults. They feed mainly, again, on maples and box elder, and they will feed on plants low to the ground. They feed on seeds that have dropped earlier in the season. They'll feed on those dry seeds if they need to. And quite often they will congregate. They might get blown down and they'll be on the sidewalk or on a deck, that kind of thing. But they're not considered to be, pests as far as posing any kind of threat to trees, shrubs, or plants. It's more the nuisance that they have in the autumn time when they're trying to seek winter quarters. And because last year was bad, it's very possible we might have a more energized, infestation this autumn, the way things are looking.
All right, thanks, Jim. Lowell, this is a viewer who sent in an image of some pretty significant weed control issues in turf, and their question is, what do they do now with this?
Yeah, so herbicides are sometimes our friend and sometimes not our friend here. It's really important when folks buy a herbicide at wherever they're buying it to really read that label, because I'm guessing what happened there is they bought a weed killer or a broadleaf killer that had glyphosate or Roundup in it, and just went out and tried to spray some weeds out there, whereas 2,4-D would not have done that. Would have probably taken care of the weeds. So you really got to read the labels on that. At this point, that grass, if it was glyphosate in that herbicide, that grass is probably dead. And they're looking at reseeding here in probably the mid to latter August. So actually not that far away, but that's the best option at this point.
All right, thanks, Lowell. Kevin, this is an Omaha viewer who moved into a home that had 2 flowering crab apples. They're being treated for rust. She also noticed, you can see the base, she noticed this at the base, and then these kind of funny, odd things on the trunk that look like perhaps they are not supposed to be there.
Yeah, definitely looks like she could be dealing with a canker issue there. Unfortunately, that is on the stem of the trunk. So, I would look for dieback up in the foliage, especially on the sides where you're seeing those interesting things, which to me appear to be canker symptoms. The area on the bottom you can see was kind of rotted, and there's a good chance that canker fungi were able to establish in that area and then work their way, up the tree, or they could have even came in from other parts of the tree as well. But it definitely looks like it's cankered, and unfortunately,
Rogue it out.
it kind of means death for the tree.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Kelly, this is a Red Cloud viewer and sent an image of what looks like tomatoes growing out of the tops of the Yukon Gold potatoes. So, he's wondering if this is sort of an interesting and unique phenomenon, or what is it exactly?
No, it's a perfectly normal phenomenon, not even a phenomenon at all. It's just the fruits of the potatoes. And potatoes don't always fruit because they put a lot of their energy into the tubers or the underground storage stems or the part that we eat. So if you have good conditions like this year with all the cool conditions and the moisture, then they will sometimes go ahead and flower. They always flower, but they don't always set fruit. So they're just setting fruit, but be aware that they are very poisonous. So you do not want to taste them and eat them. So sometimes people think they've crossed with a tomato, but potatoes and tomatoes are a Solanaceous family. They're related, and that's why they look similar.
They just want us to know that the oak midges are back because his wife has been attacked by them.
Okay, so this is like the itch mites that result
Must
from
be the
midge infestations
Yeah.
on oak leaves. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially if the leaves are rolled.
Yeah.
You can get midge infestations. I'd be interested in knowing about that. And so thank you for the information.
Excellent. Lowell, we have a viewer from Bellevue who did not get her fertilizer down this spring. She has 2 questions. One is it too late right now? It is, in fact, a holiday, but it's not usually a fertilizing holiday, I don't believe.
Yeah.
And the second is her turf is in the shade of mature maples. She's wondering if the trees are actually taking nutrition from the turf, which is part of the reason it would be looking so green or so limey.
I guess it's possible. Quite often tree roots will be down below where the turf is on that. So I guess I wouldn't be too concerned about that. In terms of fertilization, if it looks really bad, you could apply a little bit of nitrogen to that turf right now if you really want to green up. But honestly, we're not really, unbelievably, we're not that far away from making fall fertilizer applications. So if you can stand it for another 6 weeks or so, I'd just wait till fall applications.
All right, thank you, Lowell. Kevin, we have about 30 seconds left, and we have 2 viewers, one in Fairbury and one in Omaha, that have yellow leaves with dark spots on their roses. They want to know what to do, and they really don't want to do a chemical approach.
Okay, well, the only thing that's really available is sanitation at this point. It sounds like it's black spot of rose. It's pretty typical, nice circular black spots. Leaves turn yellow, and then they senesce, they drop off. So remove those because it will come back once the rose puts out new leaves, and they'll get infected again. So clean it up if you don't want to spray.
All right.
That's about it.
Thank you, Kevin.